Welcome to Off Script, the Dream Pitch podcast sponsored by Tiller. Each week we're joined by closers who are actively pitching and closing deals at some of the biggest names in tech. We ask them about their dream pitch, what their favourite prompts for rapport building, discovery, objection handling, closing question, and also a mistake they won't make again. This week I'm joined by Ollie from a large fintech company. How are you doing?
Very good. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Very good. Really excited to jump into this with you.
Likewise.
Go through get to know you a little bit.
Yeah.
And then flow into your dream pitch.
Cool.
Great. Well, why don't we start off by focusing a little bit about your role and your time in sales to date?
Sure. So I currently work in the fintech space. Been in sales for about 6 years professionally.
Yeah.
Although I've been in sales unofficially, I guess, my whole life.
Nice.
My dad was in sales in the 80s, which from what I've heard is a good time to be in sales.
Yeah.
Door to door, classic. Yeah. So been selling since I was a little kid actually. But outside our house, junk sales. Made 300 quid in a weekend once, which
very good.
Which
Doing
was
what?
Good for an 11 or 12-year-old. Just selling out, books, all the CDs,
nice
videos.
Yeah.
So good training for what I do now. But professionally 6 years and really enjoying it.
And so obviously with your dad being in sales, that kind of created that early role model for you. Is that
100%.
why you decided to go into it professionally? Did you explore becoming a astronaut but then thought it wasn't for you?
No, I think astronaut definitely wasn't for me. I think for me, it was my dad was a big inspiration. And money, everyone likes to make a bit of money, so I think that's combining learning from my dad and also the potential earnings that sales can bring you. I think it's a good motivator to get into it.
All right. And so far in sales, what is it that you get out of it that makes you really love it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love sales because I think it's sort of, I mean, this is corny, but it's a little bit like a microcosm of life. So you've got challenges, targets, things you want to hit in your life, and in sales, you've got obstacles that are thrown at you. You've got to overcome those. You've got to build relationships with people as you do in life. So it's I find that if I'm good in sales, I'm usually things outside of sales are pretty good, and vice versa. I think for me, I don't know if you know Chris Voss. He's a negotiator, former FBI guy.
Yeah, not personally.
No, not personally.
Maybe one day.
Maybe. And he says everything's a negotiation, which sounds pretty cynical from the outside looking in. But actually, I think if you're good at sales, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a good person, but it means you're usually quite good at navigating life. I've seen that with a lot of good salespeople. They're good at, whether it's in the queue at Tesco's or closing a deal or an argument with a spouse or whatever. There's a lot of that involved. So it's interesting to learn about the dynamics of sales.
I think it's always interesting how what you learn from a work environment you take into your personal life and vice versa. And the better you get at influencing at work, you start to then be able to push those into other parts of your life as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what is a typical day looking like for you these days?
So, I'm working in the fintech space. So my current role is a sort of blend of sales as well as account management and relationship building. So it's a lot of networking with CEOs and founders to try and bring them on board to the service I'm selling. A lot of prospecting, some cold calls, which after 6 years in sales, I'm quite familiar with. But you never fully get used to the someone telling you to F off or hanging up or whatever. So that's fun. A lot of emailing and then just booking meetings and really just having genuine conversations with people about how I can help them or, what their current processes look like. Yeah.
Great. And with all of this knowledge of 6 years and all the way back to the 80s, I'm really excited to hear what's in your dream pitch. So why don't we jump into your dream pitch?
Sure.
Obviously, we've got the beginning of the conversation that's going to happen, which is rapport building. So how are you starting that conversation?
So, I mean, obviously it really varies. And at this point, it's kind of intuitive. I try and keep it just as natural and as flowing as I can when I'm speaking to someone. Try not to stick too much to a rigid routine. But having said that, usually I try and find out... Well, try and talk a little bit about the business rather. So, if if I've learned that they've just had funding or they're doing something that I think is pretty cool, I'll talk about that. And I'll say, saw that you just got funding, saw that you guys are expanding to the US. I think that's really, really cool. What, just out of curiosity, what brought you on the call today? Something like that is, flattery is always helpful. And also it helps you learn a little bit about what they're looking for out of the call. Can start the conversation off in a good direction.
I think it's always interesting when you start a call and you're trying to bring that person along with you to get to know you quite quickly. Talking with genuine interest about what they're interested in is always going to help build that connection. So, have you seen it backfire?
Yes. In another job I did, sometimes I would book a meeting, but it wouldn't be with the individual that's coming on the meeting. So I might call up an owner or a CEO, for example, when I was selling FX services. They might have a problem from their point of view. They might not have time to come on the call, so they might send their FD on the call. And so the FD knows nothing about me and doesn't want to be there because they've got a million things to do. So saying to them, why have you jumped on the call today? Sometimes FDs are transparent enough where they say, well, I was made to be on this call. So then it's a little bit of a flat note there, and you've got to sort of go, right, okay, well, so was I, because it's my job to sell.
Fair enough.
So hopefully we can bond over that for a moment and then get this over and done with as quickly as possible whilst keeping both of our bosses happy.
Nice. What a save. Love that. Well done. What a save. Great. Okay. So you've got them ready, warmed up, ready to engage with you, and you're going to have to find out about their business and learn a bit about what they're doing. So from a discovery point of view, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so initially I'll depending on how long we've got on the call, I'll lay out usually the structure of the call. So I'll say, Alistair, typically how these calls go is we cover off X, Y, and Z. And then we go through any questions you might have, and hopefully at the end we've figured out a way to work together, and hopefully there is an opportunity there. I'll usually ask people in the discovery point if there's anything they want to cover off first. That's helpful for me to prioritize their needs because time is limited. So if you only want to talk about one thing, we can dive straight into that. If you've got 3 things, we can talk about that. That's also helpful for them, I think, to kind of not sell to themselves, but to remind them why they're on the call. There's a bit of that as well, and then typically I'll say, so tell me about how you manage X, Y, and Z, depending on what I'm selling. If I was selling hedging services, I might say, tell me about how you currently manage your foreign currency. Tell me about how that works. If the markets move quickly against you, what have you got in place to manage that risk, et cetera, et cetera. But we'll just get straight into usually the biggest overarching concern or need that the client might have.
Fintech is a scary place to sell. Because there's an awful lot of jargon, there's an awful lot of financial services and different financial services. So when you're going through those discovery phases, how much of you is going, oh my God, please say what I think you're going to say rather than something completely random? Or when you're selling to that industry, if you query it, are people generally quite open to teach you what they know that you don't know?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the person. That's a good question. I think that there's always somewhere you can take it. I think that if someone's agreed to sit on a sales call with you and have a meeting with you, usually it means that A, they're open to having this conversation, and B, usually there's something you can provide in terms of value that they want. Usually, not all the time. So I kind of have the spin. I don't know if you know the spin. You probably do the spin framework. So situation, problem, implication, need. So I kind of have that in my head, and I kind of go, right, work through that. What's the situation? The situation is they have suppliers in China, and they need, they're bringing back USD, or they're selling into Europe, etc. Okay, the problem might be, well, there's currency volatility. We're in election period right now. Things can change quickly. And so what impact can that have on their business? Well, if they're, if they don't have enough margin there, they can become uncompetitive. They might have to up their prices. They might be able to not compete with other people in their market. That could be a big problem, and that can wash out on their profit and loss. And so what's the need there? Well, they need to have an insurance policy in place, for example, if we're selling a hedging service. So it's kind of working through all of those stages. And then if there is no tangible need there, sometimes, and not every person will agree with me on this, sometimes you just sell yourself. Sometimes people just want to work with you because they like you and they trust you. That's a huge part of it. There is no shortage of services and values out there. So a huge reason someone would work with me over another provider would be because they like me and they trust me.
So you talked about spin training, taking me through that and talking about hedging services. Each part of that spin training, the situations, for example, at the top, how long does it take you to learn all of those different situations when you start in a role?
Well, when you start in a role, it can take a while. I think when you have, a few meetings and you get into your role, you can learn pretty quickly. There's only so many problems that most businesses face, and often they overlap.
Yep.
Often if one business has a problem, it means that most other businesses in their industry are going to have that problem.
Yep.
So, it's just about collecting, going, right, okay, that's a problem for them. That's also a problem for them. That's also a problem for them. Wow, that's going to be a problem for all these people. Okay,
Yep.
How do we solve that?
No matter what you do, everyone will always have some kind of objection.
Sure.
And it's okay. It can be pricing. It could be priority. They are challenging you on why they should bother pushing forward with this.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you handle an objection? How do you go about working with someone to help overcome that?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's about assessing how genuine the objection is.
Yeah.
So for example, if it's a cold call and someone is busy or they don't know who you are, that objection is going to be, whoa, I don't want to be called out of the blue and I don't know you and I don't want to speak to you, as I do many times a week when people call me. So that's getting over that initial objection, being warm, getting to the point quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many times people have put me on the spot and I've made mistakes in the past. They've gone, right, go on then. I'm driving home. I've got 30 seconds, go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to have that elevator pitch ready. And when I've had it ready, it has worked. It's worked incredibly. So there's kind of handling those initial just concerns when you're calling someone up. But then again, if you're calling someone up and they say, say I'm calling you up and I want to talk about, again, we'll stick on the topic of FX.
Yeah.
And you say, we've got a broker, not interested. I'll say, actually, that's why I called. So it's good to flip that objection over. That's why I wanted to reach out to you, because I'm working with businesses similar to yours, and actually FX, currency is a problem for them. It's not a problem for us. Oh, that's interesting. You just said you use a broker. How come? Why don't you use the bank? Oh, well, the broker's got better rates. So rates are important. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, why are they important? And then going down, every time someone gives you an objection, they're actually giving you information.
Brilliant. Love that. I'm going to soundbite that. Put that on a t-shirt. Love it. Great. Really, really good approach to it. Okay. When have you had an objection handle go wrong?
All the time.
You were so confident a second ago.
Yeah. Well, when have I had it go wrong? Sometimes with sales calls, as with anything in life, people just aren't interested.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you've got to learn when to just close the book on something and move on.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't mean close it. I think most salespeople have a problem with giving up too early.
Yep.
Because their egos get bruised.
Yeah.
And actually, if you know your product and you're punchy, you can actually overcome a lot of objections.
Yeah.
But there comes a point where someone just is not interested because, one, they don't like you, two, they have a great relationship with the people they're currently working with, or three, your service just doesn't solve a problem that they have. They don't have a problem that matches with what you do. They don't need you. So I think I've had loads of examples of when it's just not a good fit, and then it's about respectfully bowing out. But actually, I would say on a side note, keep in touch if you can. Like, keep things warm. Send an email afterwards, follow up and just say, look, I really appreciate your time. And actually a couple of times people have come back to me months later and said, actually, something's changed.
Yeah.
We're interested in this. Can you jump on a call?
Cool. Okay. Well, so you've handled the objection. You're ready to go. You're heading towards their closing question. How do you handle that close? Are you a direct closer, or do you build it up through a process? How do you go about that?
I try and personally keep it as easy as possible. I don't want to make, if I'm speaking to a CEO, you're a CEO. No one wants to make your life harder. It's hard enough as it is. Every CEO's got a hard job to do. So if I'm speaking to a really senior decision maker, I want to give them the path of least resistance. I want to make it super easy for them to come on board and work with me. Yeah. So it's not overselling, which is a mistake I've made in the past and many salespeople make. It's about ensuring, right, okay, they're hooked, they're interested. We've seen there's genuine value here. There's a good fit. right, let's wrap this up and let's get this sorted. Let's not keep talking. And
Yeah.
let's not, bring everything else into it. Let's actually wrap this up and get depending on what you're selling, get documents signed or book the next meeting in or get a follow-up meeting, whatever you need to do.
So I think the approach of making the sales cycle shorter because you're going on their side and saying, look, you can think about this for the next 3 months, but really it's the right move for you. Let's just get it sorted for you. Do you find that when you're selling to a CEO, you then hit some resistance with people further down because there's questions they ask that aren't really solving their problems, but it is solving the CEO problem? How do you go about bringing in the influencers in that kind of closing process?
Yeah, I think ultimately, just the way it is, most decisions are made from the top down. So I think it's important to get the CEO or the ultimate decision maker on board. I think that's super important. I find it harder to sell to someone that's more junior, get them on board and then work your way up, than it is to sell to the ultimate decision maker, win them over, and then just tick off a few boxes with other people that are involved. So yes, there obviously are questions that come up in both circumstances. But yes, I hope this answers your question. To answer your question, it's easier to work top down.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. But sometimes you got to try top up.
Sometimes, depending on the size of the business, absolutely.
Yeah,
exactly.
True. Yeah. Right. Coming to the final part of this, which is mistake you'll never make again on a pitch. Now, mistakes are made every day while pitching, but what is a good mistake that you've made that you'll never be making again?
So I've made loads, but I would say, like I said earlier, overselling. Sometimes they reach the point in a conversation where the person's sold and they know they're sold. And actually the best thing to do then is to end and get them on board and start working with them. Sometimes overselling and keep on going and bringing up objections that they didn't even throw at you, that you think that they're going to want to know about. That doesn't do any good. So that's one. And then the second one, you can't always avoid this. It depends on the industry and the sales cycle, but I would say control the controllables. And what I mean by that in my situation is try and do it yourself. Be fully responsible for closing this deal, because sometimes you've got to bring other people in. And there have been situations where I didn't need to bring other people in to close a deal, but you might have been concerned about something to do with payments or something to do with something completely different. And I might say, actually, you know what, let's bring Chris into this. And actually, Chris isn't as invested as I am because he hasn't called you 5 times and booked the meeting and spent weeks getting it on board. And actually, sometimes you lose it because you bring someone else into the dynamic that doesn't click or says the wrong thing. So obviously, depending on your industry, sometimes multiple people are involved to close a deal. But I would say try and take full responsibility for the deal. And if you've built a relationship with a person, try and see it from beginning to end with you leading it.
Brilliant. Okay, well, look, that was absolutely fantastic. We covered a huge amount of advice and tips there. And I learned a bit more about the fintech industry, which I know nothing about, and hedging.
There we go.
Which I might look into now for the fun of it.
So when someone cold calls you, don't say, "Oh, I've got a broker."
Yeah.
That's the tip.
Well, I don't. So I'm an open goal for an FX call. Okay, awesome. Well, look, thank you so much for that. It was really good to get to know you and go through your dream pitch.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.